106.5? It's time now for Front Page Jacksonville, a show that delves into the issues that affect you. We believe in transparency and providing only the facts. And now, here's Octavius Davis.
We are back. And I got to be honest with you. It seems like I've been gone for quite a while. Jack and I were talking about it before the show. It's been like two weeks. 2 weeks for me. Jack has been gone, I think, for 3 weeks, so he's back today. But man, I feel like it's been a month full of Sundays since I've been gone. So I am happy to be back here in the studio with you, behind the microphone, sitting in the chair, talking about what's going on in Jacksonville. But before I do, I feel accountable to you. I have to share with you why I wasn't here last week. If you tuned in to Front Page Jacksonville on last Sunday and were expecting to hear my melodious voice, talking to you about all things Jacksonville and everything that's been going on, what you heard was a repeat broadcast, because it is not often, and hear me when I say this, it is not often in any spectrum of my life where I'm down and out, meaning unable to follow through with my responsibility. But last Sunday, as a matter of fact, last Saturday night, I knew. Okay. Now, I typically don't like to sit down, but my body made me sit down last week because I do a lot. I think I've shared with you before. I do a lot just in my typical day-to-day, demands with my day job, my after-school nonprofit organization, family life, things that I do here with the station, plus other things that I do out in the community. I am gone, and I hustle and bustle quite a bit. So to kind of bring you into my life just a little bit more, 2 weeks ago, my wife received a call that her oldest brother had been assaulted, essentially, which left him hospitalized. And she went to Buffalo. My wife is originally from Buffalo. So 2 weeks ago, she left to go to Buffalo just based on the reports that the family was sharing with us. It wasn't a very good report. So she left to go and be with her family and spend time with her brother. As expected, 2 Sundays ago at 12 noon, he transitioned. He passed away. And so, my wife still being there, this now takes us into last week. My wife still being there in Buffalo, the family planning the memorial service. And so that then activated me. Hey, babe, I'm on the way. I'll arrive on this particular day. And so I left to head to Buffalo on, I want to say Thursday of that week. Well, the Wednesday before I was scheduled to leave, in talking with my wife and everything, hey, babe, whatever you need, let me know. I'm ready and willing to serve however the family needs me to once I arrive. Well, Wednesday morning, she called me, flustered. She said, the lady that we were going to get to do my brother program, he's not available. She's not available to do the program. I have no idea who to contact to do this obituary. Babe, say less. I got you. Send everything to me. Now, I'm nobody's Van Gogh when it comes to graphic design, but I know how to move around those Canva streets. Okay, I know Canva quite well. So I had the humbling honor of designing my brother-in-law's obituary. Did the design that entire Wednesday. My wife got to the print company. I say, hey, when you get there, call me. I know exactly the lingo I got to speak, because in my day job, I oversee a team of graphic designers. Now, I'm not a graphic designer, but the graphic design is one of the departments that I oversee. So I'm very familiar with what needs to get done. Speak with the gentleman and get all of the specs that I need from him. All right, cool. Say less, sir. I got you covered. What's my deadline to get this to you? Oh, get it to me by tomorrow by noon. Sir, you will have it by close of business today. So got everything done. The family was pleased with what I put together. My wife, I call my wife QM, quality management. I got the QM's approval and sent everything over. So here it is. That's Wednesday. I'm on my flight, red eye, headed to Buffalo Thursday morning. I get to Buffalo. I think my flight gets there like noon or something like that. So I'm talking with my wife. Hey, babe, all right, cool. What else do we need to get in place? Whatever you need, baby, I'm ready. She says, how comfortable would you be doing the eulogy for my brother's service? Okay, hey, babe, if that's what the family needs, okay, if that's what the family needs, I got you. Now, here's the thing. This was my first time meeting my in-laws. My wife and I, we've been married for 16 years. This was my first time meeting my wife's side of the family. I know, that sounds crazy. It's like, how in the world do you go 16 years? You have children with this woman. This is your first time meeting your wife's side of the family. Well, I'll share with you. Now, if you have families are interesting, okay? However, when my wife and I met, she had just walked away from the religion that she was raised in, which was Jehovah's Witness. And if you know anything about the Jehovah's Witness faith, or if you don't know, this will be your opportunity to learn from it. When you walk away from that belief system, they do something what's known as they will disfellowship you. And when you are disfellowshipped according to the Jehovah's Witness beliefs, your family members who are still in that belief, you can have no contact or communication with them. Yeah. Now, I'm not here to judge or cast stones at the belief system. I'm just bringing you up to speed on how it is this man who's been married to that woman for 16 years was meeting my in-laws for the very first time at a memorial service. And the reason why that was even able to come about in terms of me being there, my wife being there, et cetera, is because her oldest brother identified as a Christian. I believe Baptist was the denomination that he was a part of. But he hadn't been, really associated with the church long or anything like that. So they didn't have a minister to come in and eulogize my brother-in-law, Demetrius, as he transitioned. So his brother-in-law, Octavius, hey, babe, whatever the family needs. And when I tell you, I could not have been more humbled in that moment to be asked to carry such an honor. I wanted to say that I was speechless, but I wasn't, because I had a message to share with the family. And once the service was over, had the honor of being able to meet different family members, and, they share, hey, man, that message was right on time. I needed that. That was for me. And I had to tell them, hey, well, to God be the glory. I'm just grateful to have been a vessel, because truly I am here to serve and to do whatever it is that you all need. So then this was last Friday, where we saw my brother-in-law off with our final farewells. My wife said, well, you know what? I want to take you to Niagara Falls, but I don't want to take you on the American side. I want to take you over to the Canadian side. Cool. So off we went to Canada. So, we head on over to Canada. And it's crazy. We go over the bridge and everything else. We get through customs. And then we go to, to experience the falls. And if you follow me on Instagram at The $1 Million Voice, you should be following me on Instagram by now, by the way. okay, at the $1 Million Voice. That's DA $1 Million Voice. I posted a video of, us there at the falls. It is gorgeous over there. I don't know what it is about going across that bridge, Jack, but the air seemed cleaner in Canada. The grounds seem to be prettier in Canada. Now, listen. I am USA till I die. Please understand that. I'm just letting you know there was a distinct difference when I left U.S. Air and ended up in Canadian Air. There was a difference. The energy was different. There's a place called Clifford Hill, I think is what they call it. Clifton Hill. And it's literally a hill. But on this hill, it's kind of like restaurants meets, or when you go to Orlando, and not the theme park part of Orlando, but where they got the slingshot and like those other rides and everything, just kind of in like those touristy parts of Orlando, and you have your restaurants and everything. It was exactly like that, but on a steep hill. So you're walking up this hill while they got restaurants and this big old Ferris wheel and everything else going on. So we get back. We finish up at the falls. We get back to Buffalo. We get to our hotel. Our flight leaves out Saturday morning, and we're traveling all day Saturday to get back. Flight was delayed in Atlanta, so that put us back even more. Finally got home last Saturday night. And I'm very intentional with my time, and I am a creature of habit. So on Saturday nights, I am typically in bed by 8 o'clock so that I can be up by 3 a.m. to get here to be with you by 6 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Well, I'm doing my usual routine, and I'm like, something ain't right. The body not bodying like I'm used to it bodying. And so I think maybe by 9:30-ish that evening, I had to reach out to Wanda P. and Jack and say, hey, I'm something isn't right. I'm not going to be able to make it in tomorrow morning to do the show. I was exhausted. I was dealing with exhaustion. That's what the issue was. So that's why I wasn't here last Sunday. And I felt like I owed you that measure of accountability, because I know you tune in regularly to get the latest news and information, to find out what's going on out here in these Duval streets. And I'm always obliged to be the one sharing that information with you. However, last week I had an opportunity to be reminded of my humanity, that even I sometimes have to sat down. I have to sit down every now and then so that this body of mine can continue doing what I'm placed here to do. So I hope the week was enjoyable for you. Spring break, parents who have kids that are still in school, look, it's almost over. They go back to school tomorrow. Okay? Spring break has come to an end. They go back to school tomorrow. Your grocery bill can go back to normal. Kids staying up all time of night yelling at the TV because they playing their video games, scaring you half out your mind because they done woke you up out your sleep. Yeah, I experienced that same thing. But it all ends tonight because they have to get themselves in bed tonight to be ready for school tomorrow. You made it. Now, you have maybe 2.5 months, 3 tops, to get ready because summer break is right around the corner. When spring break comes, the school year is a downhill ride from there. So go ahead, get your grocery money ready. Go ahead and, you know how you go ahead and find out your EBT card hookup. Now, I ain't going to go into too many details, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Go ahead and get your summer money ready for that grocery bill because it is coming. I don't know why kids are hungrier during Christmas break, spring break, and summer break. Can't get them to come out their room and come and eat dinner during the regular school day, the regular school week. But something about those off seasons, Christmas break, spring break, summer break, they eat all day. If it wasn't against the law, I would be tempted to put a security code on my refrigerator and pantry where it only will allow you to access it 3 times a day. Morning for breakfast, afternoon for lunch, and at night for dinner. But that 15-year-old of ours, the boy eats all day. It's like the refrigerator swinging open and closed all day. You would think that the AC unit was inside the refrigerator. But I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it ends tonight. You get a break because they take themselves back to school tomorrow. Now, what does that mean for you? That also means that traffic is going to pick back up. So as you get ready to leave for work tomorrow, get your timing right. Don't allow this past week of riding on I-10 and 95 and all those other major arteries around the city and you ain't have to deal with no traffic. Don't let that spoil you because it's going to be crazy come again tomorrow. You try going across that Buckman Bridge come 7 o'clock, 7:30 tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're going to be late. Call in. You're going to be late. You will. But if this is your first time tuning in to Hot 106.5, the soul of Duval on a Sunday morning, good morning. I am Octavius Davis, the host of Front Page Jacksonville. We're going to get into some stuff today. Although it's been somewhat of a slow week in terms of news stories, there have been some things going on. And I want to first begin by giving my condolences to the families who loved ones have not been found. If you're not familiar, over the weekend, a boat capsized in the St. Johns River near the Dames Point Bridge. Apparently, there were how many members were on the boat? I think it was 6. I think it may have been a total of 6 individuals on the boat. However, 2 adults and 2 children had not been found initially. They did find 1 individual of the 4 that I just mentioned, but it has not been announced whether it was one of the adults or one of the children that were found, that they were able to, recover alive. And the Coast Guard had to make the very hard decision to call off the search for the remaining 3 individuals. This was Friday night. I said over the weekend. So this happened on Friday night where the boat capsized. But the Coast Guard did have to call off the search. There are 3 individuals who are still missing. And I just want to give a heartfelt word of encouragement to those families. Hey, the city's with you. We understand and recognize this is a very difficult time for you. Our heart goes out to you that you're even having to experience this. So our prayers and thoughts are with you during this time. And your loved ones have not been found. And so I'm going to say there is still hope. We'll trust and believe that miracles can indeed still happen. So while you're trusting and believing for the miraculous, I'm going to attach my faith with yours as well, if that's where your faith is. But I would also like to give a huge thank you to the Coast Guard of Mayport, the Coast Guard Air Station of Savannah, the Coast Guard of Cutter Coho, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, as well as the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission for all of your efforts, your resources, and your team being in the water and being available to not only look for these individuals who have been missing, for your diligence and long hours with tapping every resource at your disposal, but also being there to provide updates to the family. And I'm sure in some instances, comforting them when necessary. Thank you for all that you do. We recognize that your service to this community is not an easy task, especially with one like you experienced over the weekend. So thank you for doing it. On behalf of the entire Hot 106.5 family, thank you. Thank you for being there and being so diligent with looking to find those individuals who have been missing. Stick around. A lot more is on the way. You're listening to Front Page Jacksonville. I'm Octavius Davis.
Now back to the show that informs you and discusses the issues. Front Page Jacksonville on Hot 106.5.
During the break, Jack, you came across some information regarding the story we just shared about the family, and there was some boat safety information that you came across.
Yeah, so I'm on ABC News right now. That's the source I looked up, and just reading through the article since I hadn't heard of it before you brought it up. Going over it, at the end of the article, it said Coast Guard stated that no one on the boat had been wearing life jackets, which is just kind of, it's just sad to hear because, something like that can completely turn a situation like this on its head. Yeah. Because, life jackets, seat belts, it's really the little things with, just operating a vehicle like that, like you have lives in your hands, if you're conning a boat, driving a car, it's you got to take it seriously. You need to, make sure everyone's safe on that.
Indeed. And you educated me on something during the break because you con a boat. I didn't know if you drive a boat, do you ride a boat? Neither of those are correct.
You actually have to con the boat. That's how you take control of it. Yeah.
So would wearing the safety vest be the equivalent of wearing a seatbelt?
100%. Like imagine getting T-boned, no seatbelt. That. I mean, I'm not sure what kind of situation these people were in, but sure. Imagine. You get knocked unconscious and you have no life jacket. It's like it's an extremely dangerous situation, which, I mean, unfortunately happened here, it seems. But if they had the life jackets on, it really could have been a night and day situation, depending on how everything went down.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because we've, I'm sure, have heard or even seen or experienced situations where a person may have been wearing a seatbelt in a car accident, but they were still injured, but their life was preserved, right? And so wearing a seatbelt, wearing a life vest won't always preserve life, but it can at least increase the chances, or should I say reduce the odds of losing life if you are in a incident of some sort. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out because the initial story that I read, it didn't make mention about whether they were wearing life vests or not. But then also thanks for educating me on conning a boat. I just figured if that bad boy got a steering wheel, we driving.
A lot goes on in the boating world, Octavius. A lot.
Well, thanks for hipping me the game, man. I appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in to Front Page Jacksonville. I'm Octavius Davis. We're going to stay here for a moment because, as I mentioned, the story we just wrapped up is talking about the boat that capsized on Friday night near the Dames Point Bridge. Well, I want to stay here near the Dames Point Bridge for a moment with this next story because I don't know if you saw this or not, but did you know that the Dames Point Bridge has been dinged as one of the 68 bridges across the country at risk of collapsing if hit by a large vessel? The Dames Point, so we have 7 bridges in Jacksonville. 7. Of the 7, 2 of those bridges, I don't necessarily enjoy crossing. I do it, but I don't necessarily enjoy it. I don't have a fear of bridges. I don't have a fear of heights. But I just don't enjoy crossing 2 particular bridges in Jacksonville. The first is the Buckman Bridge. If you have to drive across the Buckman Bridge, you understand my hesitation. Because for one reason or another, the Buckman Bridge, most people who drive, well, I can't say most, some of the people who drive on the Buckman Bridge act as if they are auditioning for a role in Fast and Furious. They treat those 4 or 5 lanes on the Buckman Bridge like the Grand Prix, the Indy 500, the Daytona 500. They are going for broke on the Buckman Bridge. And we've seen throughout the years countless incidents and accidents on that bridge. 2 that immediately come to mind, I think maybe 4, 5 years ago, former Jacksonville Jaguar Leonard Fournette was in an accident on the Buckman Bridge. Well, a third incident now comes to mind. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm talking during drive time, I think it was morning drive, pieces of the bridge began to fall off the bridge. Like cars were having a difficulty navigating the bridge because the cement began to uplift on the bridge. There was another incident about 6 or 7 years ago. An entire family, unfortunately, lost their lives on that bridge. They were rear-ended, if I remember correctly, by a truck, or either they were rear-ended by a car that then caused them to rear-end a truck, and the car caught flames. So I do not enjoy going across the Buckman Bridge. The second bridge that gives me trepidation, the Dames Point Bridge. I don't know what it is about this bridge. The wind gusts seem to be a little stronger on top of the Dames Point Bridge. And I know it's definitely the longest bridge in Jacksonville. If not the longest, it's kind of par with the Buckman, because the Buckman has some length to it as well. The Buckman just isn't as high as the Dames Point Bridge. But either case, the Dames Point Bridge has been dinged by the National Transportation Safety Board as being one of 68 bridges across the country at risk of collapse if hit by a large vessel. Just last year, I think it was in Baltimore, just last year, we saw where the cargo ship collided with the bridge and the catastrophe that ensued from that situation. So, COJ, National Transportation Safety Board, and whoever else is responsible for ensuring the safety of that bridge, yes, please. Yes. Can we please make that happen? I don't want to hear about a stadium of the future. I don't care about none of that. Can we ensure this bridge is secure? I've been in Jacksonville so long, I remember when the Dames Point Bridge was being constructed. It was built in 1989. I was here, alive and well. I was 11 years old in 1989. So I remember when that bridge was constructed. So here's the thing. The bridge was constructed in 1989. It has not undergone the vulnerability assessment that was developed by the American Association for Safety, Highway, and Transportation, which rolled out in 1991. The bridge was constructed in 89. A safety assessment rolled out in 91. We're now living in 2025. The bridge has not gone under the vulnerability assessment. And so this is why it was dinged as one of 68 bridges in the country that is vulnerable. And think about it. Where is the Dames Point Bridge located? Over water? Yes, we know it's over water. All bridges are located over water. But I'm speaking about when you think about where everything is positioned throughout the city. The shipyards are right out by the Dames Point Bridge. Cargo ships pass underneath the Dames Point Bridge regularly. Regularly. Not to mention, we also have a Carnival Cruise Line out over off of Heckscher Drive. That's another large vessel. So there's it's like the more I start thinking about this, anybody ever seen that movie, Final Destination? It's like so many different probabilities and possibilities are literally racing through my mind right now, thinking about that bridge. And so it sounds like me and 295 are going to be very familiar as I go around other methods to get to my place, my destination, by avoiding the Dames Point Bridge. Jacksonville, we need to get that taken care of. COJ, yes and please. Yes and please. That's the type of stuff that, as a taxpayer, I don't mind my tax dollars taking care of that. Please take care of that expeditiously. Do you need a double helping of tax dollars to ensure that that's taken care of? Yes, please. Sign me up for that. Because that is an unnecessary liability. And I'm pretty sure that other residents who also commute having to take the Dames Point Bridge would not mind that tax expense. Front Page Jacksonville is a show where your comments, questions, and concerns are always welcomed. So if you'd like to jump in on the conversation at any point, you can join me at 833-758-1065. That's 833-758-1065. Let me lighten the mood a little bit, talking about some of the things that are going on right now in Jacksonville. Shout out to the Wounded Warrior Project. They recently did a bike ride through the city of Jacksonville, an 18-mile bike ride with a group of about 40 veterans and volunteers. And it was pretty much to bring awareness to military veterans. And military veterans, they participated in this ride. And just having a chance to read some of the comments of individuals who participated in the ride, man, first and foremost, thank you for your service if you serve in the military. I have two daughters who served in the Navy. And, so, I guess you can say we're a military family. I guess you could say that. They both live up in Virginia now. One was stationed in Newport News. The other was stationed in Norfolk. And so one of the things that immediately stood out to me when reading this story, one of the individuals, his name is it Jose Ortega? Santiago Ortega. He served for 30 years in the Army. And Santiago was sharing how, he's really suffered in silence as a veteran with just many of the different things that he's gone through because of what he witnessed. 3 tours in Iraq, dealing with just some different mental health challenges and things of that nature. So he was saying that, hey, look, this ride was very helpful for me, therapeutic for me, because it gave me an opportunity. It gave me an opportunity to be able to get around some like-minded people so that I could be reminded that, hey, I'm not alone. I don't have to suffer in silence. And so the next soldier ride-along is going to take place in St. Augustine, around the Bridge of Lions, but also the Wounded Warrior Project wants military veterans to also remember that there are resources available to veterans if you're struggling with mental health challenges. That's what this ride was all about. So I encourage you, if you're a military veteran, if you're suffering in silence, you do not have to suffer alone. Visit the Wounded Warrior Project, their website, to get information about those additional resources. Hey, good morning. You are on the air with Front Page Jacksonville. Caller, how are you this morning?
I'm tired just like you, Lydia Bell.
Good morning, Sister Bell. How are you today?
I had to recover just like you. My body had broken down.
Yeah.
After our successful rally, February the 22nd it was. But I want to thank you and your beautiful wife for coming out and supporting us, and I give you mine and our committee's condolences.
Thank you.
When I When I first saw you and your wife, you all just reminded me of an Egyptian couple,
Wow.
a goddess and a god. You're beautiful, and I appreciate your support. So now we're having another. It was called Brentwood 300. We reached our destination. It was people
Beautiful.
came out through the day, because there were so many different activities going on that day.
Yes.
So now we're moving towards Brentwood 3000.
Come on. Now, I remember you mentioned that as well that day that was going to move on to the Brentwood 3000. Beautiful.
Yes, because what has happened is that by us having no knowledge of the morgue being built in Brentwood,
Yes.
and as they have come to the completion, they have put these 4 big stacks on the roof. And we stopped 2 crematoriums from opening up, 2 funeral homes from opening up crematoriums.
Sure.
We have constantly asked, are there going to be cremation there? They said no. Okay. Now we are learning that those stacks that they placed on the roof, and they're huge,
Right.
it's going to be the cleansing of chemicals, and it will be the steam of some sort releasing through those stacks. That's dangerous. We don't have to wait around to see what's going to happen. In 2003, they had a class action suit against Jacksonville where they brought all that incinerated toxic ash and put over in the Moncrief and Fairfax area. Mayor McLeod Bethune, the elementary school is completely closed. People died of cancer, kidney disease, blindness. They settled in 2005 for a lousy $75 million, where people some people didn't get anything because if the $75 million ran out, well, hey,
Right.
tough for you. Sean Conn got $1.4 billion for a stadium. And you could get a $75 million for people dying, cancer and all. So we don't have to wait around in Brentwood to see what's going to happen. Our little babies that go to school that's 32 feet across the street from this monster.
Well, and let me ask a quick question, Sister Bell, because I saw your text the other day. Thank you. I've been trying to get caught up, which is why I hadn't been able to respond. But I saw your message about the stacks. And yes, you mentioned that, it's not going to be a crematorium. This is what the city has been saying. It's not going to be a crematorium, et cetera, et cetera. I even spoke with, I'll say this unofficially. I had to put this disclaimer. I unofficially spoke with a city representative who also said that, well, it's not going to be a crematorium. Cremations won't be happening, et cetera. Well, then why are there smokestacks on top of the building?
Right. You don't need it. Look, like I'm trying to say, we don't have to wait around. They settled in 2005 with all those people dying from out Moncrief, and the toxic ash is still there. Yeah. We don't have to wait until that. Now it's about 22 years later, and we're dealing with the same thing. Our babies are only 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. They got to look at death all day going to school and got to breathe death all day. And it's wrong because those stacks, nothing like Jacksonville is the largest city. They could have put this thing anywhere. The list that they gave us was all light and heavy industrial areas.
Right.
That area, Brentwood, wasn't even on the list. So what we're dealing with is redlining, and what they're saying is we don't care. We do what we want to do. We're going to continue to insult and put the worst things in the black community and suck it up, Buttercup. Only problem is my name ain't Buttercup, and our names are Buttercup.
I know that's right, yes.
And we're going to fight this because what we're doing now is trying to repurpose that building and stop death that's coming to us. And it's not going to just affect us. What we're trying to do is show everybody in the city of Jacksonville it's going to affect them because anybody that use I-95 South and I-95 North is going to be affected by this poison. No incinerator should be in a neighborhood. They could have put it anywhere,
Absolutely.
But they don't care. They don't care.
You mentioned that the Brentwood 3000 is what you're now aiming for. What's the date of the next march and rally?
This Saturday, February 29th at 11 a.m., right by Kip School, same place, same time.
Well, I will definitely be there with you in heart and spirit. I have to travel this weekend, so I won't be able to make it there this Saturday. But please know that I'll definitely be there with you in heart and spirit. And you don't know this, but you gave us the perfect segue because coming up during the 7 o'clock hour, Anthony Brown with Red Alliance for Justice is going to be here in the studio with us as well.
Right on time. He's been standing there right with us. And he's just fighting us all. We're fighting for our lives.
Absolutely. Literally. Yes. Well,
we're
Sister
fighting
Bill,
for our babies' lives. See, if we don't protect them, who will?
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us on Front Page Jacksonville. We got to get to break so that we can get Brother Anthony in the studio. But as always, we always appreciate you jumping on the show with us.
And always appreciate you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Stick around. More is on the way. You're listening to Front Page Jacksonville.
The heartbeat of the community. Front Page Jacksonville returns on Hot 106.5.
This past week, we literally lost a living legend. I'm talking about George Foreman, a mountain of a man in more ways than one, in the boxing ring, but just in life. This past week, George Foreman passed away. His family made the announcement on social media. And I wasn't born when Rumble in the Jungle took place. I've heard about it throughout the years, you know, him and Ali going toe-to-toe. I've heard about it, but I've never witnessed it myself. So I didn't get a chance to see George Foreman at his prime in the boxing ring. But I believe I did see when he was, I think, 45, when he reclaimed the title. And I hear that this man could hit so hard, it would make you reconsider your entire existence. I don't want to experience a human being that has that type of force behind their hands. I really don't. But George Foreman passed away. He had 12 children. Now, something that I always found comical about the late, great George Foreman is he had 12 children, but 5 of his sons were named George. It's like, bruh, come on. I understand wanting to leave a legacy. I do. I get it. My son, he's Octavius II. I get it. I think most men want to at least have at least one of our male children named after us. At least one. George said, nah, all 5 of the boys. George. Cut and paste. Control Alt C? George 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, 4, because he would have been George 1. But here's something else that I always found interesting about George Foreman, and actually something that inspires me. So I did research to try to find out roughly how much he earned in total during his professional boxing career. That information wasn't known. What I was able to find out is that it's believed he made at least $5 million during the Rumble in the Jungle fight against Muhammad Ali. Again, this is 1974. $5 million in 1974 was a lot of money. A lot of money. However, if you recall, when he left boxing behind, as a fighter at least, he did some things with HBO Sports, a commentator for boxing, which was cool. I always loved hearing his analysis as a boxing commentator. But if you're listening right now, pop quiz. Do you have a George Foreman grill in your kitchen? Now, I don't have a George Foreman grill. I want one because the grill is legit. But do you remember when George Foreman became a pitchman and was selling the George Foreman grill? This was like back in the 80s and definitely in the 90s. George Foreman earned more than $200 million off of those grills. And so while the money he made as a professional fighter, the total isn't known. I'm almost positive he made more money selling those grills than he did in that ring. I would love to be a pitch man. I would be a pitch man. Another athlete who I see what he's doing, and he's made goo gobs of money doing it, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal is a pitch man. For anybody who got that check, I won't say anybody. That's probably a bit too absurd. But if they come in with that right check, the general insurance, Shaq is there. Icy Hot, Shaq is there. Papa John's, Shaq is there. And it's known that Shaq is a very astute businessman. He owns a part of Papa John's. So mad respect to all of the athletes who make that transition into the business world and far exceeds their business income, far exceeds what they made as a professional athlete. And another reason why I like that, and I'm just gonna let you know right now, I'm biased. I'm biased with this stance because there had been so many misconceptions and stereotypes and misnomers about the African American athlete, about the intelligence quotient and what we could and couldn't do on the field, on the court, off the field, et cetera, et cetera. And these brothers are making it happen. As a matter of fact, there was another athlete who passed away last week. I can't think of his name, former NBA player. But I heard Shaquille O'Neal mention that this brother was actually a mentor to him and what led him to go the route that he went from a business standpoint, because the NBA player whom I'm referring to who passed away, he was a billionaire. But he did not make his billions playing in the NBA. He made his billions in the business world. He owned several Wendy's and then continued building from there with owning chain restaurants. So, young man, young lady, if you say you want to be an athlete, cool. But don't let that be the destination. Let that be part of the journey because there's so much more that you can do. Hey, you're listening to Front Page Jacksonville. More is on the way.
Live from Anna John Levine Studios, WHJX, Ponte Vedra Beach, Hot 106.5. Committed to bringing you the hottest music from R&B stars like this.
This is John B.
Hi, this is Janet.
Hey, this is Ron Isley, the Isley Brothers.
Download the free Hot 106.5 app to your phone to hear about what's coming up next. This is Hot 106.5, Duval's only R&B.
Redlining goes back as far as the FDR administration in the 30s. It was a mandate from the federal government that trickled down to the state and trickled down to the city of Jacksonville, in which the federal government no longer wanted for black and white folks to live together. So they were complicit in terms of breaking up certain areas based on redlining, whether that be the appraisal of homes. In the case of Brentwood, you have all of the characteristics of redlining. You have an interstate that's running through the city. You have a community that's devoid of resources. And you have a history of hazardous material that have been dumped in the community. And just like any other thriving community, this community deserves to have some of the same things that a community like Mandarin or Queens Harbor or Bay Meadows would have.
A moment ago, we had Lydia Bell. She's the president of the Metro Gardens Association of Brentwood, and we were talking about the morgue situation that's going on in Brentwood. And as I've told you before, we're going to keep talking about the morgue on Front Page Jacksonville until we get repurposing of that building because it is not right. Well, during that conversation, she referenced redlining. And I shared with you, hey, well, during the 7 o'clock hour, we got a brother coming in from Red Alliance for Justice who's going to talk to us in more detail, not just about what's going on in Brentwood, but there is a greater issue at play in this city, across this country, that predominantly impacts many communities that African Americans live in. And I'm speaking about none other than the co-founder of Red Alliance for Justice. Those comments that you just heard a moment ago was from this guy who's rocking his Malcolm X t-shirt in the studio with me this morning. I'm talking about Anthony Brown. Anthony, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
My man came, but you went back 90s with the Malcolm X shirt. Do you got an X hat on too?
No, this is Georgetown Hoya. 90s, man. It still got the 90s theme, too.
Yeah, you remember back in the 90s, those cross-color outfits with the X and everything. My man came in strong with the 90s vibe. Yes, sir.
Right, that's right.
Well, man, welcome to Front Page Jacksonville. You know, you and I, we had an opportunity to talk a little bit off mic just about redlining as a whole, as a larger issue, which we'll get to in just a moment. Before we dive into that, I want to first have an opportunity to help the listener understand a little bit more about you and why this advocacy is so important for you when you talk about redlining. So talk to us, man. Where are you from?
Yeah, I was originally born in LaGrange, Georgia.
Okay.
It's about 40 miles north of Auburn, Alabama.
I hear that Georgia twang, didn't you?
Yeah. It's about 90 miles southwest of Atlanta, Georgia. I guess I got the advocacy bug in me because my father, when I was young, worked with a guy by the name of Reverend Mac Jones, who was an advocate in LaGrange, Georgia. They advocated against the Ku Klux Klan in Hogansville, Georgia, as well as LaGrange, Georgia. And then shortly thereafter, he was kind of pushed out of the city, and we eventually moved to Jacksonville, Florida. When we came,
your father was pushed out of the city?
No, Reverend Pastor Mac Jones was. Yep. My father, ironically enough, got a promotion, and we moved to Jacksonville. That's how I ended up in Jacksonville. It's funny because when we got to Jacksonville, it was extremely segregated in relation to LaGrange, Georgia. I went to elementary schools that were 50-50.
Okay. And roughly what year are we talking about here?
We are talking about 89, 90, somewhere around there. There hasn't been a lot that's changed in that regard. I bring all that up because it was something that was in me. And as a person who's always done advocacy work in the community, one of the things that we looked at the fact that these communities were devoid of resources based on a number of factors, and one of those factors was redlining.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the things that we used to kind of use to advocate in the community, because redlining is an official term that I think sometimes when people get into advocating and doing advocacy work, they get more emotional and they don't really stick to the technical terms and some of the technical terminologies that we're going to use in order to advocate against things that are injustice in the community.
Why is using the technical term more accurate than allowing someone to allow themselves to get carried away with the emotional aspect of that advocacy?
Well, there's two reasons. One, if we say that racism exists, how do we quantify that?
Got it.
You understand what I'm saying? If you say, hey, this person doesn't like me because I'm black, or this person doesn't like me because I live here, you don't have any data, you don't have any analysis to quantify that. But we all know that redlining is an official term that the white community and the black community have legitimized. And it's funny that you bring that up because our group goes down to City Hall once a month. Matter of fact, we're going down to City Hall on the 25th. And one of the things that the city council did probably about 6 months ago is they passed a resolution based on redlining, which legitimized and also said that they are accountable, city councils and the city as well, for allowing for these discriminatory policies to be a thing here in Jacksonville, Florida. So if you admitted that you were complicit with it before, now we have something to really fight against, because now you have admitted that you've done so. What we want to see now is the regress, and we want to see, if you will, the reparation part of that from a city standpoint based on the redlining, because you did admit to it, all 19 city council members.
Thank you for breaking down the aspect of being able to quantify the racism with the technical term of redlining versus the emotional aspect. Because here's the thing. You and I would say that we're probably similar in age, right? And so I know I felt racism, right? Now, I haven't experienced a lot of racism, but I have felt racism. But I can't quantify that feeling. There's no data to support that feeling. But now when you bring redlining in, okay, well, let's pull out this map. And talk to me about this feeling. Where were you? Well, I was over here in this area. Okay, what happened? Well, this particular thing happened. I was trying to get a loan for my home, and the bank wouldn't help me out, man. I think just because I'm black. Well, let's take a look at the map. So when it comes to redlining, why? Because this isn't a Jacksonville. Jacksonville, the city council members, COJ did not invent redlining.
No.
Right? So where did redlining come from? And once we dive into that, I'll then be able to circle back to the scenario I just gave in terms of attempting to buy a home and feeling like you're discriminated against because you're black. So where does this redlining term come from?
The term redlining comes from a federal mandate from the federal government around 1933 during the FDR administration. And what the government wanted to do was they wanted to separate individuals based on where they lived, and they wanted to give certain appraisals to people, man, based on not only where they lived at, but essentially what's funny is, let me just cut to the chase. They wanted to separate blacks and whites and other people based on where they lived. And the term itself comes from when you looked at the map. There was a map of desired areas to live in, and there was a map of undesired areas to live in. The red areas, of course, were the areas that it was okay to dump waste in. They didn't necessarily have the best appraisals. And the perception was this was not a good place to live. It would bring the value of the home down. The green and what we call amber areas were affluent areas, a place of high destination that people wanted to live in. And these areas were created from the federal government that trickled down to the state and trickled down to places like Jacksonville, Florida. Quick side note, for those who want more information on it, you can read the book Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. His daughter also has a book that goes into even more further detail, and it has Jacksonville and it has places like New Jersey and San Francisco and other places that go into detail about it. But what people don't understand is locally, you can't do anything without the signing off of the federal government to support it in order for it to last as long as it did. And I think that's a key component that people really don't get. Those types of legislation and those types of things that we are feeling here locally that have lasted since 1933, the federal government could easily step in and they could easily say, hey, look, because of what took place, we are the chief reason why you still have these issues. Yes, they seem to throw a rock and hide their hand because they will throw it back on local municipalities and say, oh, that's not a federal issue, it's a local issue. But we know, historically speaking, that we couldn't have done these things, or you couldn't have carried them out, rather, unless the federal government was complicit in some of these discriminatory policies.
And so now, that being the case, I'll go back to the scenario that I made mention of. So here it is, federal government back in the 30s put this redlining thing in place, right? City of Jacksonville is one of those cities across the country that's, all right, yeah, we're gonna implement this throughout our city. And we'll talk about some of those areas that are impacted by redlining in just a moment. And so going back to, I felt racism, African Americans, we feel racism in different environments and different times. So I'll go back to the scenario that I made mention of. Home ownership. Right, trying to get a loan for a home,
right,
and the person, the potential home buyer, the African American home buyer, they can't prove that they were denied for that loan because of the color of their skin, but they kind of felt like in that moment, like, yo, I think they trying to, trying to discriminate against me. How does redlining impact home ownership when you speak about banks extending loans? Because as you mentioned on the map, there were the undesirable areas and the desirable areas. So how does redlining impact that aspect of living for African Americans with wanting to purchase a home?
I think there is a beautiful example of a documentary about Dayton, Ohio in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, in which a gentleman had a friend who was a white guy who lived in a different neighborhood versus his neighborhood, and he invested $50,000 in his home. And the other guy invested roughly the same amount. His home, when it was appraised, was $250,000. The black gentleman's home, when it was appraised, was worth $75,000. And he had invested just as much money into that home. So same square footage, same amount of investing, He just so happened to be in a different community the whole nine.
Yeah.
That's one example. The other example here recently is there was a black family. I don't know what city it was, but they attempted to sell their home. And initially, when they tried to get their home appraised, it was worth probably about $85,000, $90,000. They took all the pictures out of the home, and then they put nothing but white pictures in the home, or they removed all the pictures, and it came back, and it was almost $300,000.
No way.
Once the appraisal came back.
Wow.
So there are plenty of examples of things like that. One may say that that's just a one-off, but it's not just a one-off. We have numerous examples of that. The other issue that I have that is something that is generational is, again, the highways and the hazardous stuff that is put into the communities. Why is that affecting? Because now, over the years, when people have asthma or they have medical issues that come up, a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that these communities have been neglected, and people, when they want to put a wood treatment center like Fairfax here in Jacksonville, or when they want to run highways through the community like MLK runs straight through Durkeeville, those are visual examples of what redlining looks like. Not just about the house appraisal, not just about what it looks like in your community, but also the effects of some of the hazards that go into it. Because let's think about it. If I live in a community where there's a highway that runs through it, not only people are throwing out trash, but the exhaust from the cars affect the children and affect the elderly and affect everyone else that's in that community. And over years, it's not a coincidence that a lot of people in these communities, man, have all types of hazards. In addition to that, there has been cases where we can prove that homes in some of these predominantly black communities have been redlined. They're hotter than other homes in other affluent communities, which means to say not only are you going to pay more in terms of utility, but at the end of the day, that still affects your health too.
Right.
So we have a gambit of a number of different factors that play into what redlining looks like in the past and in the current present that we live in today.
The first time that I was introduced to redlining in Jacksonville, and I'll take a moment. You're listening to Front Page Jacksonville. If you're just tuning in, I'm your host, Octavius Davis. Joining me in the studio right now is the co-founder of Red Alliance for Justice, Anthony Brown. If you'd like to join in on the conversation, 833-758-1065 is the number to call. I was first introduced to the complexities of redlining in Jacksonville probably in 2021.
Okay.
I had an opportunity to sit in on a symposium. I think the brother's name is Ennis Davis.
Ennis Davis.
You know Ennis. Man, this brother was dropping knowledge, and I'm sitting in the back of the meeting like,
shout out to Ennis.
Shout out to Ennis, because I'm like, it all makes sense now.
Right.
So much began making sense to me because, taking a quick trip down memory lane, I used to attend a church out east off Odessa Street. And when I would drive to church, I would always wonder, man, why are these industrial buildings literally right across the street from these residential houses and apartments, right? But you just figure, okay, well, it's jacked up, but okay, I guess it is what it is. Well, I also am an alum of Edward Waters University. So being shout out to E-Dub. So being out in Northwest Jacksonville, shout out to Mixontown, right? Driving through Mixontown to do different things, you'll see like a meat packing district and all other type of industrial facilities right across the street from residential housing and so forth. So in 21, while I'm sitting in this symposium and Ennis is breaking down redlining, I see these two very same communities that I'd always wondered, why is this so jacked up this way? So what are some of the communities outside of Brentwood? We know Brentwood has been impacted by it. We know the east side has been impacted by it. What are some of the other communities in Jacksonville that have been impacted by redlining?
One of the communities is Fairfax, 13th and Fairfax. They had a wood treatment plant that was operational there probably in the 70s and the 80s. And that wood treatment plant contaminated the area and the residential community that's right adjacent to it. EPA was involved. I was also a part of that organization called Fairfax Environmental Committee for Justice. Shout out to that organization and the people that did good work there. That was kind of my first introduction to, what the redlining situation looks like here in Jacksonville, Florida. That, ironically enough, was in 2021 as well.
Word.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So EPA got involved, and it was a national issue. The irony of it is the community, because it was a Superfund site. For those who don't know what a Superfund site is, EPA gets involved, and then they have a series of meetings, and then the community can decide what they want in place of something that infected the community, et cetera, et cetera. If you go to Fairfax and 13th Street here on the northwest side of Jacksonville, Florida, the community wanted a grocery store. There has not been a grocery store there. That community is still infected. EPA has since gone and left. Now, with the Trump administration, I don't know if EPA is coming back. That's one community. Another community was in the same area, an elementary school, ironically enough, Mary Pathau Platoon Elementary. The building is still there, but the area is still contaminated. They have yet to do anything in that area. There's also another area right there on Moncrief. If you're going down Moncrief and you pass the Boys and Girls Club on the right-hand side, you keep going down further, that area and that land is also contaminated. So these are all characteristics of areas that have significant redlining, and they all have the same thing in common. They all are predominantly black. They all are devoid of resources, and the city is well aware of it. But even with them understanding the complexity of what's going on, there is very little legislation to deal with it. So in addition to Brentwood, you have Fairfax, and you have other parts of the city. In addition to, of course, the historical east side, they also have redlining. Also, to add another layer to the complexity of it, you have gentrification that's taking place too.
Absolutely.
So on the east side, for example, they have a soccer field that's right there on Old Florida Avenue, a.k.a. A. Philip Randolph. You're going to need a place to park. You're going to need a place to eat. You're going to need a place to, quote-unquote, tailgate. Where are they going to take the land from?
Right.
In addition to that, you have a jail that's coming. The people on the west side did not want the jail. They came out in opposition of it. Chances are they're going to try to put that jail on the northwest side of Jacksonville in red line areas and areas that are devoid of resources as well. Quick thing here about Edward Waters College. Edward Waters College is also in an area that is redlined, also has a little bit of contamination in it. That's problematic because you have 15 undergraduate students. You also have residents over there. You also have an elderly home that's right across the street. And you have businesses that are being shut down as we speak, and you don't have anything to replace it. So it's not just the hazards. It's not just the highways. It's not just the appraisal. It's also the lack of resources in these communities, too. Because what we don't talk about, redline, is we don't talk about the lack of economic development in these communities, too, which is something that needs to be talked about and something that we address in our organization.
So, Anthony, when we hear things like, well, look, man, y'all always trying to pull the race card, right? You always try to make it seem like somebody's out to get you. The man is out to get you, right? Well, maybe not actively here and now, but systematic racism, systems that were put in place years ago that we're still feeling the effects of, that we're still impacted by, is a very real thing. That's why I love how at the beginning you broke down the difference between using the technical term to define our experiences versus allowing a lot of hyperbole and emotion to be the driving force behind our expression. Because here it is, you met with city council, all 19 city council members admitted.
That's right.
That, the redlining thing is, that's a real thing.
That's right.
City of Jacksonville, we are bad. Right. But was there anything expressed by city council that would lead you to believe that there are steps that the community can take to reverse some of these mishaps that the city has allowed in these redlining areas?
I think one of the things they did was the resolution was not a bill. Those are two separate things, and they did not necessarily articulate next steps in terms of what their role could be to reversing some of these discriminatory policies. I will say this, though. They did pass the Durkeeville bill probably a year ago, which gave Enos Davis and his consulting firm $200,000 to do a series of workshops and town hall meetings discussing 30 or more vacant lots that were owned by the housing authority here in Jacksonville, Florida. It is a decent start, but once the funding runs out for that study, what are the next steps moving forward?
Right.
So again, they have done some decent things in terms of acknowledging, taking a somewhat of a responsibility for their predecessors and themselves as well, and passing the Durkeeville bill. But there's a lot of different studies in Jacksonville, Florida. What we want to see is we want to see the funds attached to those studies. We want to see more transparency when not only the elected officials here in Jacksonville, but the business community and the ones who are working in conjunction with the city to make sure that they are doing right by the people in these communities that have been harmed. One other thing real quick. Emotion is part of the human experience.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be dismissive of the hearers that are listening to it right now. And we've done a lot of interviews and testimonies with folks, man, who have gone through hell and back in some of these communities. So I don't want to be dismissive of somebody that's going through something. But at the same time, we have to be a little bit more strategic and deliberate about how we get these resources and then how we deal with systemic racism. Systemic racism doesn't necessarily have a white sheet on. It doesn't necessarily come out with a Confederate flag and beat you over the head. But it's just as debilitating because those systems can socially engineer these communities to look the way they do. And when we get acknowledgement from city council saying they were complicit, we have to work accordingly and we have to follow up on that. One of the things that we can do is we have a series of town hall meetings. And in these series of town hall meetings that we do every third Thursday, we employ on the people in the community to tell them to be more civically engaged. Little organization, little change. A lot of organization, lots of change. And when we go down to City Hall, we have been effective with between 10 and 15 people. Octavius, imagine if we had 50 to 60 to 70 people that went down there, regardless of whatever they were not trying to do for the community. The court of public opinion would step in and say, hey, look, there's something serious going on in the city of Jacksonville. You guys need to do better about what's happening. So we can fight all we want to, but at the end of the day, I am begging and imploring on the people that live in these red line communities that we have to be more diligent and we have to have a lot more sense of urgency about what's going on, because what's going to happen is, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, gentrification is going to take place, and those communities, especially old communities like Myrtle Avenue and Durkeeville, they're going to be places that used to be an area where there was a robust black upper middle class.
Well, we see it in Springfield.
Springfield is a classic example.
I think late 90s, early 2000s is when we really began seeing the gentrification ramping up in the Springfield area.
Right.
And it looks night and day now from what Springfield used to be. One of my biggest takeaways during the march and rally on February 22nd with our friends out in Brentwood is when Shout
out to Lydia Bell.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, man, she a firecracker, man.
She is.
She had a Zulu spirit and everything ready. I love it.
Right.
Well, one of our hometown heroes who was also there, Sister Audrey Gibson, one of the things that I heard her state when she was on the mic is, hey, we have to strategize and organize. And you just referenced that as well. So for the listeners who said, man, I really like what this brother is talking about right now, how can they get involved with Red Alliance for Jacks to help be a part of that strategy?
There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. You don't necessarily have to be a mouthpiece like me. Again, we have our town hall meetings in which we have 3 components to those town hall meetings. The first component is to inform the community and highlight people who are doing great things, but they don't have the platform in order to articulate exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
The other component is what we're doing today, is educating the masses about what redlining looks like, what discriminatory policies look like, and solutions for those particular things. That's something else that we don't talk about. We do a lot of identifying the problem, but we don't really go into detail about what those solutions look like. And then last but not least, civic engagement. Civic engagement comes in a lot of different forms. For us, we go down to City Hall, we go to school board meetings, and you have an option to speak, or you don't necessarily have to speak. We wear green T-shirts to signify what the robust Black community used to look like. So we wear green so people can identify us. And so for those who are on the fence about wanting to join an organization like that, they can visually see us and they can approach us. The other thing, too, is we develop a script. And in that script, in the town hall meetings, we disperse that script, and you can email your local city council member, you can email the governor, you can email the president if you want to. And as many of those come in, you cannot dismiss those. You cannot dismiss the phone calls. And eventually, once they're bombarded with us advocating from different angles, they're forced to at least have a meeting. When they have that meeting, Octavius, we have a list of demands that we already have on standby.
Nice.
Once we sit back, once we go behind closed doors and talk about what we want, we already have the power behind us because the people have pushed and said, this is what we want. And then we start to get those things implemented. We do not stop until we see that first brick and mortar go up, or we see that first debilitating, whatever that is, removed out of our community. But these things are not going to happen unless the community is actively involved. So strategically, you don't have to talk like me.
Yep.
But what we are advocating you do is attend these town hall meetings, find out who's representing you, whether it be at the local municipality or whether it be your state rep. We can help you do those things. And when you do it, you can be an active participant, even if you don't say anything publicly. Also, real quick, the church that we have these town hall meetings at, quick shout out right now to Pastor Leo Dawson, 1405 West State Street. He is actively trying to get enough funds so he can transform his church currently into a community faith-based center. And in that community center, it's a one-stop shop where we do political advocacy, where we also have church. He also does a community cleanup in which he feeds, in which he hands out clothes. And so it's another opportunity for folks, man, who don't necessarily want, when you hear politics, maybe that's a polarizing term for a lot of people, but you don't necessarily have to do that. We have other things that you can get involved in. And one of the things that you find out when you come to these town hall meetings is, I want to go in that direction because I like that sister or I like that brother.
Right.
So that's what these meetings do. They're not just a soundboard for us to get up there and tell you about what's going on in the community and you can go back home and sit down and watch Housewives. These are meetings in which if you want to get involved in something, you don't necessarily have to be politically involved in order to contribute, if you will.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that because, some people will hear the conversation that you and I are having right now and say, well, man, I don't know all of that information like what they're spitting right now. Or the other aspect of that spectrum, hey, look, I want to get involved, but I don't want no heat coming my way. You know what I mean? But as you mentioned, there are other ways to get involved.
It is.
And shout out to Preacher Dawson. He and I went to high school together. Shout out to Preacher Dawson.
He told me, Pastor D.
Yeah, man. Hey, look, these Duval streets, man, we roll click deep.
Okay.
Hey, but Anthony, thank you so much for hanging out with us today here on Front Page Jacksonville. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to being able to attend one of your town hall meetings as well to continue updating my knowledge because, like I said, when I heard Ennis the other year, I was like, oh, that's dope. And then when I had an opportunity to meet you at the March and Rally the other week, I was like, I definitely got to bring this brother in because a young man, we're about the same age, but I feel like I'm young too. I just got more gray hair. Right. But what encourages me as we prepare to transition to break, what encourages me, man, is seeing more men answer the call, step up to the plate and allowing our voices to be heard, because the changing of the guard is happening in the city of Jacksonville. And so I want to encourage you, man, continue operating in your role, empowering the people with all the knowledge that's been given to you as well. So shout out to you, brother. Proud
Appreciate
of you, man.
it. Real quick before we go to break. For those who want to get in contact with me, my number is 706-289-0700. My email address is TB, that's Tango Bravo, 7787 @yahoo.com. Our next town hall meeting will be April the 17th at 6 o'clock, 1405 State Street West. Come as you are. We look forward to seeing you, and let's change the narrative in these communities. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Octavius.
My pleasure. Stick around. This is Front Page Jacksonville. More is on the way.
Front Page Jacksonville resumes on High 106.5.
If you're just tuning in, you missed an amazing conversation with Anthony Brown, co-founder of Red Alliance for Justice, right here in Jacksonville, talking about the redlining issue that has affected Jacksonville, but specifically impacted predominantly African-American communities throughout this city. And giving an educational background and insight as to why some of the parts of town look the way that they look when you speak about residential housing, but then also industrial complexes, but the ill effects that redlining has had by having these types of industrial businesses and everything around schools, around residential homes, and so forth. So if you just tuned in and you missed it, listen to me. Here's what you want to do tomorrow. You want to go to hot1065fm.com. You're going to go to the On Air tab, and you're going to go to Front Page Jacksonville. Because right there on the website, not only will you be able to find today's show, but you'll also be able to find previous episodes of Front Page Jacksonville. And not only that, because we recognize that we are living in a digital social media age, you can also watch the video version of Front Page Jacksonville. The show is recorded each week and placed on YouTube. You can find the YouTube version of Front Page Jacksonville at youtube.com/@ the $1 Million Voice. That's DA $1 Million Voice. You can find it on YouTube. That is my YouTube channel. Now, if you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, this will be a great time to do so. The video version of the show will be up later tomorrow as well. So go to YouTube. If you're listening, if you're driving and listening, do not do this. Okay? This is for people who are home or at a central location listening to the show on the Hot 106.5 app. But let me reiterate, if you are driving, do not do what I am about to recommend. If you're listening right now, open up your YouTube app and go to my channel at the $1 Million Voice and just hit that subscribe button. Once you do, go ahead and hit the little bell to receive notifications. That way you'll be notified for each Front Page Jacksonville show that is uploaded so that you can watch the show as well. Well, I think it's only appropriate that we segue from the conversation that we had with Anthony Brown talking about the issues of redlining and look at what's happening right now federally. Now, I'll tell you right now, I don't want to get too deep into this. We spoke before with how Trump has been signing executive orders left and right. You would think this man is handing out tickets to Come Together Day, the way he's just handing out these executive orders left and right. Well, the most recent one that was signed no longer requiring government contractors to honor the segregation ban. And so, depending upon which side of the fence you land on with this topic, I've seen several different conversations from this most recent executive order. What I mostly hear is you have one side of the fence where people are saying, oh, well, Trump is rolling back. He's bringing back segregation. Trump is bringing back segregation. We're about to have restaurants and water fountains and bathrooms, whites only, colored only. This is what's about to happen. And then others are saying, well, nah, that's not what's going to happen. They're just the government, the federal government is no longer requiring contractors to honor that segregation clause when you speak about, discrimination or what have you. What's also being said is that although Trump has signed this executive order, that allegedly will not change the Civil Rights Act of 1965, which was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Here's what I'll say. It's setting a dangerous precedent. Will it won't? I don't know. Will we see colored only bathrooms, whites only bathrooms in restaurants? I don't know. But I do think it is setting a dangerous precedent. Because let's just take a moment to consider what we've seen already. This man has not been in office for 100 days yet. I need to find out when that 100-day marker is, because Dr. Nashawn Nix, I'm going to bring him back onto the show. Had him on the show a few weeks back. Anybody who's familiar with Dr. Nashawn Nix does a lot of great things in the community. Also ran for political office here locally, and he recently flipped. He was a Democrat. He's now Republican. And he and I spoke after the show. I said, hey, well, look, I want to bring you back on the show. He said, yeah, man, let's do it once Trump is in office for 100 days so we can talk about, just his 100-day report card and where things land. Dr. Nix, get ready. I'm bringing you back in, bro, because we're going to talk about this stuff. Trump signing this most recent executive order is setting a dangerous precedent, because when we look at what's happened so far in his term, let's just take one thing that he's done so far: rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI programs. Well, we just came out of a holiday season. Well, MLK holiday. Well, do you think it was by coincidence that he was inaugurated on the day that our country recognizes Martin Luther King? Absolutely not. That was by design. That was by design. And my evidence for that belief is everything that he's done since getting into office at the federal level, doing away with DEI programs. Anything that has any modicum of diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're seeking to do away with. And then watch the trickle-down effect. Right here in Florida, what did we start hearing Governor DeSantis parrot? And I will refer to the approach as a parroting approach. Right? We're doing away with DEI. Right? Well, player, you wasn't talking about that before Trump got in office. Where was doing away with DEI last year? 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So if I haven't shared this on this show before, I'll share it now. I'm nonpartisan. I don't necessarily subscribe to the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party. So I haven't hitched my wagon to either one of them. So when I see this rolling back of requiring federal contractors to honor, discrimination, basically, or honoring that they won't discriminate when it comes to gaining this government contract, I think it's only a matter of time before we begin seeing the state of Florida and other parrot governors say the same thing. Rock! We're not going to honor segregation. Rock! Because for whatever reason, what I've seen as the status quo over the past 10 years, 8 years, whenever his first run, I think his first run was in 2016. For whatever reason, whatever this man says he's going to do at the federal level, they copycat at the state level. I believe we are going to see some version of a copycat in Florida as it relates to segregation. Because to date, DeSantis has sought to copy what Trump has done at the federal level. Because just a couple of weeks ago at a press conference, DeSantis was saying, yeah, we're gonna implement DEI measures here in the state of Florida as well. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Can you imagine if Barack Hussein Obama would have dared to do anything of the sort? And not necessarily with segregation, but I mean, you take your pick. Can you imagine had Obama been like, yeah, we're going to dismantle the Department of Education? You would have thought that he had declared World War III, because I'm sure the overreaction by Fox News and every other conservative outlet would have been screaming bloody murder. But for whatever reason, this hypnosis that Trump has this country under, they are rallying behind and echoing everything that he rolls out there. And little by little, bit by bit, I see a very dangerous precedent being set that is leading us somewhere. I don't know where it's taking us, but we are headed somewhere. Stick around. More is on the way.
The heartbeat of the community. Front Page Jacksonville returns on Hot 106.5.
If you or someone you know receives Medicaid benefits, I empathize with you, especially if you have been attempting to submit claims through the portal and those claims are either not being paid or there's issues altogether with even attempting to upload your information to the portal website. So there's a huge issue right now where Medicaid recipients throughout the state are having issues being able to access their benefits. One mom in particular most recently sounded the alarm because she has not been able to get the medical support that she needs for her son because she can't get the Medicaid documents uploaded. Or the bills are going unpaid. The bills are being uploaded to the portal system that Medicaid recipients are required to do by the Department of Children and Families, but the bills are not getting paid. It's not just locally. It's happening throughout the state. And it has been going on for quite a while. Action News Jax has reported on this maybe a year or so ago. But the problem persists. There is something wrong with the system. Now, of course, when DCF was asked about this, DCF, they didn't evade the question. But I'm not necessarily feeling the answer either. Because here's the issue. Medicaid recipients are having an issue with the actual portal website itself. They say that it's consistently down, preventing them from being able to upload the documents for their billing information. And or once the bills have been uploaded, the bills are not getting paid. When DCF responded, DCF spoke about new applications that have been processed. Over 5.8 million applications have been processed. More than 3.7 million client accounts have been created. We've reduced the average complete time of an application from 60 minutes to 30 minutes. Hey, that's all fine and well, but the bills ain't getting paid. DCF said nothing about the unpaid Medicaid bills. So what's really going on? So if you are a recipient of Medicaid, I really hope that DCF gets that taken care of very quickly, because people need their benefits. Your children need their benefits. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on Front Page Jacksonville. Once again, if you have not already done so, be sure to follow me on social media at The $1 Million Voice. That's DA $1 Million Voice. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as Octavius Davis. That's 1-0, not 2. Stick around. More is on the way, and I'll catch you next week right here on Hot 106.5, the soul of Duval. Catch you later. Peace.
Front Page Jacksonville, Sundays from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. For show episodes, go to hot1065fm.com. We are Hot 106.5.